presencia, we are calling. Please lend us young so as to be successful. You are welcome on this wonderful day. We are grateful for your presence here. We are calling. Please lend us young so as to be successful. You are welcome on this wonderful day. We are grateful for your presence here. We are calling. Please lend us young so as to be successful. You are welcome on this wonderful day. We are grateful for your presence here. We are calling. Please lend us young so.
It was maybe an organic response to a need, to a felt need, but it sort of started by itself in spite of circumstances, not because of them. I always tell people I had a full-time job, and Leocadia had a full-time job as teachers in large boarding schools. And these are pretty demanding jobs when you're a teacher in a boarding school, because you're never off duty. But the Amin regime interfered or intervened or happened, whatever you want to say. And that disrupted every facet of life in Uganda. Children started dropping out of school. They couldn't afford school needs. Children were sharing a bar of soap. Children would come to boarding school for 3 months without a bar of soap. They would come to school without really basic needs. It was horrible to come into class and to ask, where is so-and-so? She couldn't come to school, she couldn't pay her school fees. It really, I suppose, started in a strange way. I went home on leave, and I was invited by a very good friend of mine, an English priest, to a very fancy meal in London, on the outskirts of London. And I remember the cost of the meal shocked me greatly, because it was more than a month's salary for one of our staff. And I happened to mention it to him, and I started telling him some of the conditions that were prevailing in Uganda at the time. So he invited me to speak in a few churches, and I came away with a few £1,000. And when we came back here, we decided what we would do with this money. And one of the things that we did was to make bread for our staff so that they would come to teach and they would have breakfast. And another was to try and keep some girls in school. Now, this really started its own snowballing effect. Suddenly, our place was really inundated with parents who actually wanted us to take. They would come with their children and they'd say, please, you take our child, look after our child. So we were sending people away, not inviting them in. It was a bit like Peter Pan, terribly uninvited and terribly unwanted. And we sort of thought that it would settle down after the Amin regime, and that things would become normal and parents would look after their own children. In fact, things didn't really improve. HIV/AIDS came to Uganda, and people didn't know what it was. What they saw were people wasting away. And what happened was a lot of the girls that I was teaching in school were dying. I mean, they were past students, but they were supposed to be the up-and-coming generation of educated women and men. And a lot of them started dying. I mean, there was a whole generation of Ugandans that were wiped out with this disease. And then a terrible number of orphans that were created. And these orphans could no longer fit into the traditional society, because the tradition was that if a man died, his brother would look after his children, because the children belonged to the clan and to the tribe. But it wasn't just the men who died. The man died, his wife died, and his brothers died, and their wives died. So there were, I mean, millions of orphans created across Africa, more than the population of Ireland. There are about 6 million AIDS orphans at the moment in Africa, about 2 million in Uganda. And this became obviously a huge problem, socially and educationally. And even though I was in the States, whenever I went home on leave, I continued to go to churches in both England and Ireland and to get sponsors to get these children into school, because it seemed the only way to give them something